My cousin said, "You don't deserve anything." After she convinced our grandmother to leave her everything. So I found out she'd lied about her identity and had her written out of the will. It was a chilly Sunday morning in October, and I was nursing a hangover, sitting on the worn-out couch in my one-bedroom apartment in Richmond, trying to gather enough strength to make myself coffee. My phone buzzed from somewhere underneath a stack of papers on the coffee table. I barely glanced at it until I saw who was texting. Vivian. My cousin hadn't texted me in months, and our last conversation had been a dry exchange about who was supposed to pick up Grandma from her doctor's appointment. We'd never been close, not really. She'd always been the ambitious, high-achieving one, the golden child in Grandma Rose's eyes, at least. Meanwhile, I was just me, the guy who somehow never quite had his act together. And Vivian never let me forget it. I reluctantly picked up the phone and tapped her message open. "Jackie, we need to talk about Grandma." That made me sit up straighter. Vivian never reached out to me unless it was for something specific, usually something unpleasant. I texted back, "What's going on? Everything all right?" The response came back immediately. "Call me." I gritted my teeth at the Jackie. She knew I hated that nickname, but she used it like it was her personal jab, the one she'd been landing since we were kids. My head was still throbbing, but curiosity got the better of me. I took a deep breath and hit the call button. Vivian picked up on the first ring. "Jackie. Thanks for calling me back so quickly," she said, her tone sugary sweet. "Fake, of course." Vivian's voice was one of those cultivated, careful ones, articulate and clear, a touch on the posh side, like she'd been practicing her entire life for a boardroom. "Sure, no problem," I said, trying to keep the irritation out of my voice. "What's up with Grandma?" "Well," she said, dragging out the word, "I've been spending a lot of time with her, helping her with bills, groceries, just the day-to-day things. She's not doing too well, Jack." I could practically hear her trying to sound sympathetic, but her tone had this undertone of satisfaction, like she enjoyed delivering the bad news. "Yeah, she's been forgetful," I agreed, "but that's just normal stuff for her age, right? Has something changed?" "Changed?" "Jackie, she can't remember half the things she told me just last week. I asked her where she kept her checkbook yesterday, and she thought I was asking about Grandpa's old war medals. She needs someone to take care of her affairs before something really bad happens." "All right. So, what are you suggesting here?" I asked cautiously. Vivian sighed, and I could almost picture her rolling her eyes. "Jack, I've already taken the liberty of handling it. Grandma signed a new power of attorney. I've already started overseeing her finances, making sure her bills are paid on time." I felt my stomach sink. "You did? What?" "I'm her power of attorney now. Honestly, it's for the best. She can't keep track of things like she used to. And no offense, but I think we both know you're not exactly the type to handle all this legal stuff." I clenched the phone, feeling a mix of disbelief and anger bubble up. "Vivian, you can't just swoop in and take over her life like that without even talking to me. I mean, Grandma's still here, she's still..." "Jack, I didn't swoop in," she interrupted, her voice colder now. "I'm the one who's been there for her. She needs someone responsible, and I'm sorry if that hurts your feelings, but she can't afford mistakes. Bills can't get lost because someone's too busy or too distracted." "Distracted?" I repeated, barely keeping the anger out of my voice. "You mean because I have a job and don't have the time to drive 2 hours every day?" "Exactly," Vivian said smoothly, like she'd been waiting for me to say it. "I don't have the luxury of ignoring family responsibilities, Jack. Some of us have to step up, even when it's hard. Don't talk to me like I don't care about Grandma, Vivian. Just because I'm not there every second doesn't mean I don't." "You don't deserve anything," she cut in, voice dripping with contempt. "Not her house, not her money, not anything. I'm the one handling things now. Maybe you should be thanking me instead of calling to criticize." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. "You don't deserve anything." Those words stung, cut deep in a way I wasn't prepared for. "I didn't call to criticize you, Viv. I just wanted to understand what was going on." "Oh, so now you care," she shot back, each word a sharp slap in the face. "Where were you when she had her fall last month, huh? Who was there when she couldn't remember her own doctor's appointment? Not you. So spare me the sudden concern, okay?" I was silent for a moment, rage boiling up inside me. I wanted to scream, to tell her she was completely out of line, but the words were stuck in my throat. I'd been there for Grandma, at least when I could be. But yeah, I missed things. I wasn't perfect. And now she was throwing it all back in my face. "Fine, Vivian. If that's how you feel, maybe you should just handle everything," I said bitterly, barely recognizing my own voice. "Oh, I already am, don't worry about that," she replied with a satisfied sigh, like she'd just won a game she'd been playing for years. Without another word, I hung up. I sat there for a moment, staring at the wall, trying to calm myself down. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, a bitter taste in my mouth. I thought about Grandma, about all the time she'd sat with me in her little kitchen, pouring me cups of tea while I told her about my problems. And now, Vivian was just taking over her life. I couldn't let it go. There was no way I was just going to sit back and let Vivian decide Grandma's future. The next weekend, I decided I'd go see Grandma myself. I hadn't visited in a while, and I knew Vivian was right about that, at least. But I wanted to hear it from Grandma, to see if she actually understood what Vivian had done. I arrived in Williamsburg on a dreary afternoon, the gray sky hanging low over Grandma's house. Her little home looked worn out and tired, the paint peeling from the siding and weeds creeping up through the cracks in the driveway. I knocked on the door and let myself in when I heard her faint voice calling, "Come in." She was sitting in her armchair by the window, wrapped up in an old quilt, her frail form looking even smaller than I remembered. Her face lit up when she saw me, and for a moment, I thought she looked like her old self. "Jackie," she said, smiling wide as she held out her arms. "Is it already Thanksgiving?" I swallowed hard, smiling as I took her hand. "No, Grandma, it's just October. I just thought I'd come by for a visit." "Well, aren't you sweet?" she said, patting my hand. Sit. Tell me what's new with you, dear. How's your little job?" "My little job." She used to say that like it was endearing, but now, with everything Vivian had said, it stung a bit. It's good, Grandma. Busy, you know, but I'm managing." She nodded, eyes drifting around the room, a faraway look in them. "That's good, Jackie. That's real good. You always were a hard worker." "Thanks, Grandma," I said, feeling a little better. We sat there for a while, just chatting about small things, the way we always did. But after a bit, I decided to bring up Vivian. I had to know if Grandma understood what was happening, if she'd actually wanted all this. "Grandma," I began carefully, "I heard that Vivian's been helping you out a lot lately?" "Oh, yes, she's a dear," Grandma said, nodding. "She's been coming around, bringing me groceries and all sorts of things. Such a good girl, that one." "Right, yeah. And I heard she's helping with your, finances too?" Grandma's brow furrowed a little, a glimmer of confusion passing over her face. "Finances? No. Well, maybe? She's such a sweet girl, Jackie. Always looking out for me, you know?" I swallowed, wondering if she even understood what I was getting at. Did she ask you to sign anything? Like, any papers?" Grandma's eyes narrowed, a bit of the old spark I remembered flickering back to life. "Papers? Well, I don't know. She did have me sign something last week. Something about making sure my affairs were in order. Such a smart girl, Jackie. Always thinking ahead." I felt my heart sink. Vivian really had swooped in and taken over, just like she said. And here was Grandma, sitting in her little armchair, completely unaware of what it all meant. I nodded along as Grandma reminisced, feeling a heavy pit in my stomach. It was clear that Vivian had taken advantage of her confusion. Grandma's words played over in my head, "Such a smart girl, Jackie. Always thinking ahead." I could see how Vivian's charm and persistence had won her over, but I knew I had to step in now. I wasn't going to let her steal everything from Grandma, or from me. Over the next week, I did some digging. My friend Evan, a lawyer who'd always been my go-to guy for advice, agreed to help. I gave him everything I knew: Vivian's recent moves, Grandma's dementia diagnosis, the power of attorney document, anything that could prove Vivian had taken advantage of her. Evan was cautious at first. "Jack, look," he said, as he sifted through the papers I'd gathered. "If Grandma signed the power of attorney willingly, it's going to be hard to challenge." "Yeah, but she doesn't even know what she signed," I argued, feeling my frustration bubbling up. "Vivian's been manipulating her, Evan. You didn't see how confused Grandma was. She thought Vivian was just helping her, not taking control." Evan leaned back, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "All right, I think there's a way we can tackle this," he said finally, "but it's going to take some finesse. If Vivian lied about the extent of Grandma's cognitive decline, it's a whole different ballgame. We might be able to prove coercion." For the next few days, we worked together, gathering everything we could to build a case. I went through Grandma's house, finding old documents, old notes she'd written before her memory started slipping, and even an old copy of her original will, one where she'd left everything to both of us, split equally. It was a far cry from what Vivian had done. Finally, we decided we needed a direct conversation with Grandma to get her on record. The following Saturday, I returned to Williamsburg with Evan. Grandma greeted us at the door, frail but cheerful, wearing her usual mismatched sweater and slippers. She looked delighted to have company, and Evan quickly won her over with his friendly demeanor. After chatting for a while about old family memories, Evan gently brought up the subject of the will. "Mrs. Rose," he said with a calm smile, "do you remember signing any documents with Vivian recently? About your finances?" She looked confused, just as she had before. "Oh, well, maybe. Vivian's been helping me, you know. Such a dear. I trust her." Evan nodded, pressing on gently. Of course. It's wonderful to have family looking out for you. But we just wanted to make sure you remember everything you signed, just so you're fully comfortable with it. Grandma squinted, her brow furrowing in that way it did when she was trying to remember something important. Well, I think she did have me sign something, yes, but she just said it was to help her. Help me, I mean. I don't really remember what it was for. She looked at me, her eyes slightly clearer for a moment. Is everything all right, Jackie? Is something wrong? I took her hand, my heart aching. Nothing's wrong, Grandma. I just want to make sure everything's okay with you. I'm looking out for you, just like you always looked out for me. Grandma's grip tightened on my hand. There was a flicker of recognition, a sense that she understood, even if she couldn't put it into words. We finished up our visit, but I left feeling more determined than ever. The following month was a whirlwind. With Evan's help, I filed a petition to contest the power of attorney and initiate a full review of Grandma's mental competence at the time of signing. Vivian was furious, of course, and she didn't hesitate to call me up the moment she got the notice. You had the nerve to challenge this? She practically screamed into the phone. You're just bitter because I've taken responsibility, Jack, something you couldn't manage. It's not about responsibility, Viv. It's about honesty. You manipulated Grandma, and I'm not going to let you get away with it. She scoffed. Manipulated? Are you serious? You're the one who hasn't been around, and now you're swooping in with some hero complex because you feel guilty. Face it, Jack. You're just jealous. Jealous? I could barely keep my voice steady. Of what? The fact that you're trying to steal from our own grandmother? Vivian, you can fool yourself, but we both know what you're really after. Silence. And then, with a bitterness that caught me off guard, she spat, well, maybe I deserve it more than you. At least I'm willing to do what needs to be done. I hung up on her, feeling a strange, cold calm settle over me. She was so deep into her own lies that she actually believed them. The court hearings were intense. Vivian arrived with a team of attorneys, looking smug and self-assured. She dressed the part, too, designer suit, perfectly styled hair, the picture of poise. Meanwhile, I had Evan, who kept things straightforward and focused on the facts. Evan started by introducing evidence of Grandma's dementia diagnosis, emphasizing that Vivian had known about her cognitive decline before obtaining the power of attorney. He argued that this knowledge should have disqualified her from acting as Grandma's legal representative. Vivian's lawyer, of course, tried to paint her as the selfless granddaughter who was simply trying to help. But Evan had anticipated this. He brought in Dr. Marshall, Grandma's neurologist, to testify about her diagnosis, confirming that she'd been in the early stages of dementia for over a year. Finally, Evan introduced Grandma's original will, showing that her intentions had always been to split her estate equally between Vivian and me. The court went silent as Evan held up the document. When it was Vivian's turn, she tried her best to look devastated, betrayed. I've done nothing but care for her, she said tearfully. I didn't want any of this. I was just trying to help. Her performance was flawless, but I knew her too well. I could see the cracks. She was desperate, scrambling to keep control. But the judge was unmoved. In the end, the judge ruled in our favor. The power of attorney was revoked, and I was granted permission to act on Grandma's behalf. The will was reinstated, with Grandma's original wishes for equal inheritance between us. Vivian stormed out of the courtroom without looking at me, her face twisted in anger. For a moment, I felt a flicker of pity for her, but it passed quickly. She'd been willing to manipulate and deceive our own grandmother for money. That wasn't something I could forgive easily. Back at Grandma's house that evening, I sat beside her as she sipped tea, blissfully unaware of the courtroom drama that had played out on her behalf. Jackie, she said softly, reaching out to pat my hand, you know, you're a good boy. I always knew you'd do right by me. I smiled, feeling a warmth that I hadn't felt in a long time. Thanks, Grandma. I just want you to be taken care of. That's all. She nodded, satisfied. Vivian's a smart girl, but sometimes, she forgets what's important. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. For the first time, I felt a sense of peace, knowing that Grandma was safe from Vivian's schemes. As I helped her up to bed that night, she looked at me with clear, steady eyes. I'm glad you're here, Jackie, she said. You always were my favorite, you know? I laughed, hugging her gently. Don't tell Vivian that, I joked. Grandma just chuckled, squeezing my hand. And as I left her house that night, I realized that this wasn't just about money or revenge. It was about doing the right thing for the people who mattered. And in that moment, I knew I'd done right by Grandma, even if Vivian could never understand why.